What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are all having an amazing day. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today is, for those that are not familiar with who Brent is, you have an application named Hive, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I have found to be one of the most attractive just qualities on how you've been able to build like such a strong brand is your ability to network with not just like big social media influencers, but literally billionaires, right? So one of the questions that I have for you that I think that even myself like would find so attractive is, how do I become friends with a billionaire?
Yeah, well, so the way that I did it originally, right? So a lot of people don't know kind of the whole story, but I grew up in a township of 600 people. So like I didn't know anybody, didn't know any other entrepreneurs. I knew a lot of farmers. That was about it.
Okay.
And so I didn't have like a network or any sort of established relationships at all out in Minnesota, where I'm from. So I actually had to move to Silicon Valley to raise money for Hive originally.
Okay.
And I couldn't afford the ridiculous rent in the Bay Area at the time. So I literally slept on the floor because I couldn't afford a mattress either.
Really?
So I slept on the floor of an illegally modified 1,200 square foot house with 20 other people in the same one house. And we all shared one fridge, one bathroom, and one like kitchen.
Yeah.
And there was like a family of 7 living in one of these bedrooms. So I slept on the floor of this house for 13 months trying to raise money for Hive originally. And right as I was about to give up, because it was just so hard, I've been trying to raise money effectively for 2 years at that point. We got a $150,000 phone call for our first round. And that was from the co-founder of EA Games, Electronic Arts.
Wow,
was our lead investor. So that's kind of how I started out. And that whole process was just a lot of taking up every single opportunity, but a lot of it was about proximity, right? So just making sure that I was putting myself in places, in parties, in events where I had proximity to, at the very least, people who knew these crazy successful people, so that I could eventually get to the point where I could leverage relationships to get to the point where I actually knew these people personally. And then it's just a matter of treating them like human beings. Yeah. Right? And not like treating them like a fan.
Yeah, and I've noticed that because I've seen even like on your social media where you're like hanging out with a lot of people, like especially like in that Vine niche, right? That have done like huge promotions for Hive and stuff like that. And I'm guessing like, how is it that, so we talked about like being able to immerse yourself in Silicon Valley and join every party to try to just connect with either billionaires or uber successful people or friends who need those uber successful people. What about like these social media influencers that are not just small people, but they're like the biggest in the game, not even just on social media anymore, but doing commercials and stuff like that? I think one of the most popular guys, if I'm not mistaken, his name is
King Batch.
Yeah, King Batch. Yeah. So how is it that like you became close friends with him? Because I could see sometimes you guys are just like hanging out and stuff like that. So I find that to be super cool, where there's a business relationship, but on top of that, you've been able to like just build such a strong relationship where it can just be so casual.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just treating them like a human being. Like I don't have hardly any photos with some of the most crazy people that I'm friends with, but I have their phone numbers. I'd rather have a phone number and a friend than have a photo with the person. Now, if the moment comes up and somebody else asks, do you want to take a photo or whatever, or if they ask if I want to take a photo, I always say yes. Yeah. But I try to position myself as a peer, right, and not as a fan. And then also it's just a matter of making sure that you're trying to lead with value. So you're not trying to always take from people that can offer something, but try to figure out a way to lead with value. And that can be really hard in the beginning because you're like, wow, what am I going to lead with? I don't have anything. And so sometimes, one of the most crazy people I've ever met was Steve Wozniak, who's the co-founder of Apple. Yeah. And that was insane. And it was at a point when I had nothing. Like I was still sleeping on the floor of that illegally modified house. But my value that I offered to was just literal friendship, just at base level. And we never talked about the stuff that everybody else asked him about. I never talked to him about Apple, right? I never talked about myself and like asked him for anything. Because like there's only one Steve Wozniak. So you're not going to ask an icon for money or for connections, because you can get that from other people. And so for me, it was just about, how can I get this man to take a second dinner with me? Mm-hmm. And so we just talked about pranks he played in high school, and like dumb stuff that he did in childhood days. We talked about laser pointers because he loves laser pointers. He carries around a backpack, this man, with like 60 illegal laser pointers that he ships in from China. And he also has like one different cell phone on each cell network. He's a very interesting guy, and he's the only person in the U.S. allowed to print his own money. So he prints $2 bills, and the government's aware of it, and it's okay. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's because like the ink is like more valuable or something than the actual $2 bill's worth. But he's a pretty interesting guy.
Wow, that's super
And
cool.
so we only ever talked about his like quirks, his hobbies. We never talked about the stuff everyone else talks about. I never asked for a signature or a photo or anything.
Okay.
And so we became friends. You know, and that's a value you can add to somebody, especially somebody who everybody wants something from, like a celebrity.
I can definitely see how when you're in a position where all people do is ask for stuff, when you find a person or an individual that is really just there to either have a good time or to be a good friend, that could almost be very like soothing or relaxing, and something that they probably want to partake in once again, right? So I think that's super cool. And now transitioning to like King Batch, like how is it that, you know, I think one of the first like events that I ever went with you to was like that Hive event, but you also had another company that was like sharing that space with you, right? That you were good friends with. I just find it so mind-boggling that like yeah, I know a couple influencers, but nothing like, you know, Brenton. But I would say like my social media following is you know, bigger than yours, but it's so cool how you've just been able to establish this just strong network of like relationships with very, you know, successful people, that it doesn't matter like what your following is, because it's the value that you can provide for these individuals.
I think that, just the biggest thing is just trying to do anything that you can to lead with value. And also, if you can, positioning is important too. So if you can be friends with someone who knows all the right people, and you can get an introduction from someone who's already built that trust with them, then you leapfrog over the trust barrier that a lot of these people have, right? Because it's like, I'm team no new friends, right? But if one of my close friends who's, you know, someone that I trust very closely says, hey, you really got to meet this person, it's like a totally different transaction of like a first impression than if, you know, you're just walking up to them at a party.
Definitely, right? Yeah, because if they have a friend, just with that trust that already comes from that individual, you're just more willing to accept the new individual.
Well, and a big part of that is just it's about establishing like good friendships in general. Like if there was anybody that you wanted an introduction to in my network, I would make the introduction immediately, and the same goes probably vice versa, and that goes for all my friends. So it's just like it's more of just the understanding that if I know, like, and trust somebody, I'm going to do whatever I can for them to help make them succeed, and I'm never just gonna, you know, take and never give, you know.
I like that. So this is a question that I like to ask, especially for a lot of people that are either successful in markets and are creating new things in different markets. So you have this Hive application, which is a social media application, correct? What has been one of the single most difficult things in creating or just nurturing this application throughout the entire process of either starting out? Do you still think that the very beginning stages of getting the funding is the most difficult part, or were there certain things as of now that you find to be much more difficult?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the hardest things was definitely just doing something at a very large scale that I didn't know anything at all about. Like, I don't program, so like starting a software company is like the stupidest thing that you could realistically do. If you're like, how, you know, I'm going to try and become successful at whatever, don't pick something you can't do anything like that's. So that was hard in convincing somebody who's very successful in a software company to trust me with their money to be able to go out and build a software company when I know nothing about software. So that was definitely something that was hard. But I would say the hardest part is when you actually achieve what you think is success and it's not enough. And so we experienced that with Hive, where we had at one point hundreds of thousands of people using the application, and that was not enough people.
Okay.
And that's mind-blowing, because if you think about it, like in any product or service, if you have hundreds of thousands of people using your product or service, you're a billionaire.
Yeah.
But if it's in consumer software, right, where it's a social network like Facebook where it's free, It's not enough people because you need millions, actually 10 million plus typically, in order to turn on targeted advertising and have it be an effective campaign to sustain the platform.
Yeah.
And so hundreds of thousands of people that used it and loved it was not enough people. So we had to actually pivot into more of like a white labeling B2B licensing play, and now we're doing another big consumer push. But that was a crazy experience for me, was to just have like the whole world had heard about it, and there was tons of people using it and celebrities and all this stuff, and it wasn't enough people.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most challenging part about it.
I like that. Yeah, and that's something that like especially for someone like, I'm very intrigued by software and software companies, but I've never, I don't feel like too many people, especially on the kind of like ongoing stages, like as they're trying to make their application uber successful, document or talk too much about it. So it's so great to be able to hear not just these amazing success stories, but as well as some of the struggles that you might encounter along the way to get to that same end goal, right?
Yeah.
So what is one tip that you would have for someone that is trying to maybe start an application, has an application idea? What is one thing that you would suggest for one of the viewers of how or can they do that?
So it would depend on what the idea was, but the first thing I would say is make sure you vet your idea. Ask yourself if it's solving a real problem, right? Not just something that you think would make a lot of money. Yeah. So it needs to solve a real problem. And the bigger the problem and the more unsolved this big problem is, the more potential you have to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But then also ask yourself, like, how big is the market for this, right? And just make sure that it's a sound idea. And then after that, either try and self-fund your way as far as you can before you raise money. So that way you can build something as tangible as possible, get yourself a pitch deck and everything if you need to raise money for it. And just make sure that no matter how hard the process gets, that you understand that it's something that everybody goes through. Everything always takes longer than you think it's going to take, but you'll get there. So
I like that. Well, guys, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys didn't want to see more videos like this, please be sure to drop a thumbs up. I also want to give Brent a huge shout out. He's starting an amazing YouTube channel with not only interviewing people like myself, but so many other people within similar markets that are absolutely killing it. So if you guys want to check out those videos, be sure to click that first link down below and check out and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Really do appreciate you coming on over. Thank you guys again for your time. Continue working hard, continue following your dreams, let your passion be what drives your success. And like always, let's make sure that we end the year on a green now. Take it to the team.